Hi, I'm Craig Rice, District 2 Representative on the Montgomery County Council, inviting you to join me for a conversation with Frederick County Executive Jan Gardner. That's coming up next, right here on County Cable Montgomery.
The popular up-county restaurant and bar in Clarksburg sets the stage for this No Boundaries. Here, two local leaders, Montgomery County Councilmember Craig Rice and Frederick County Executive Jan Gardner, share their perspectives, discuss common concerns, and look to the future. This segment begins as Councilmember Rice welcomes Executive Gardner to his neck of the woods.
Well, Jan, thank you so much for joining me. You know, it was great for you to come here to Clarksburg. Grill Mark's one of the great restaurants that's here that really represents a lot of the growth that we're seeing in the Up County. So I want to thank you very much for being here and taking the time.
Well, I'm happy to be here. In fact, I'm excited to be here. And it didn't take me very long to get here because it's not rush hour.
There you go. That's a beautiful thing. You know, it's very interesting because I know that we all have assumed some recent new roles, and I'm very curious to hear how it is being the first county executive for Frederick. I know that you have a long, storied history when it comes to your devotion to Frederick and serving, but now serving in this new role. What's it like?
Well, it's pretty exciting to be the first county executive. We're really going through all the policies, all the processes, and so we're really laying the foundation for how charter government will work in Frederick County for decades. And so that slows us down a little bit, but I benefit from having been a county commissioner there for 12 years where we shared the executive function. So now I own the executive function. And so it is a faster, more efficient form of government, and I am used to the information. It's not different, but everything comes in and we have to have a legal review to see how it works, to make sure that the council role and the executive role are known. And of course, many things we share. So our charter's a little bit different than yours. It's a little bit shorter. It's more like the Cecil County charter, right. But certainly we can learn from the counties around us. So I'm excited about it. I just introduced my first budget last week, so wow. I'm waiting to see what the council will do with my budget. And unlike in Montgomery County, where you have the ability to do significant changes to the county executive's budget, in Frederick County, the council only has the ability to subtract. It's very similar to the governor's power in terms of the budget. So I think that is a hard adjustment for a couple of the council members who were former commissioners because they have actually less power than they had before, and so it's a big adjustment for them. So I think that's one of our big growing pains. And of course, I want to have open and transparent government, so I'm trying to share with the public how charter government works so that people can participate in it, understand what we're doing, and so I think that's also part of the challenge. It's not just for me, but it's for the community. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, you were in the state legislature as a delegate before you became a county council person. So what do you think about the difference between those two jobs?
Well, you know, it's interesting because being one of 141 delegates and one of 188 elected representatives for the state is a tremendous difference from being one of 9. You certainly still have to have the ability to gauge people's roles and ideas of where they want to be and find out, you know, where they might be when it comes to particular legislation. But it's a lot easier, and I see it more as a more integrated family. You don't always agree, just as in Annapolis, but I think that overall, it really is something that gives you the ability to be more intertwined. It also gives you the ability to be more responsive to your local jurisdiction. You know, you're accomplishing things right away, and my chief of staff and I were just talking about an issue that came up, and where we had a signal timing issue, and people were complaining, saying, "Hey," and within a day, situation's done, and people are so appreciative. I mean, and it seems small. But this really matters when it comes to people's day-to-day lives, and those are the things that we do. I mean, and those are on the minor level, but you know, I mean, local government is where the rubber hits the road. being responsive to needs, and it's the reason why we decided to serve. I mean, from my perspective, it's always been about answering the call of what people need in their community, what they want, what they deserve, and fighting for that and making sure we deliver on it. And so I think that it's easier for us to do that at the local level than it is at the state.
Yeah, I think we can make a greater impact a lot faster. And we're also at the level of government where people show up at our meetings. They participate at a much higher level. And so I actually like that. I like to get the feedback from the public. I like to be able to go out and speak to events and kind of read the body language and kind of see what people really have on their minds and what they think about issues. And I think that's harder to do at the state and federal level for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's hard for a person to get to Annapolis if they're from Western Maryland or from the Eastern Shore. I mean, all of those places are still far away from Annapolis, let alone any of the Beltway communities as well. And so, for us, it's, to go from Clarksburg to Rockville might be, depending on traffic, a little bit of a drive. It does allow for community engagement. And community engagement, is so important when it comes to really having responsive government. I mean, that's one of the things that I had focused on delivering, is making sure that you're responsive to the needs, listening to the community and hearing what they have to say and being involved with them.
Well, I became involved and interested in government as a citizen, as a parent, on speaking on school overcrowding. And I really felt when I first got engaged in the process that the people I was speaking to actually were listening to me. And that really made me feel empowered. And that's why I stayed engaged, because I knew that my public input actually made a difference to the outcome. And that was pretty incredible to actually experience.
Right.
So I want to make sure that people can continue to feel that way. And because I do think, while we hear from a lot of people, it's still a small percentage of all the people we represent.
That's
so
right.
The people that show up really have the power to influence our decisions.
All of this community engagement that we do, whether it's being involved in our offices and just being responsive, but then being proactive and going out into the community, means time. And so I know, you being a mom and myself being the father of 3 children, and balancing the family life with government, how has that worked for you? It's something that requires a huge amount of time management and patience on the part of my spouse.
Well, your children are small, so I'm sure you have a greater challenge doing that a work-life balance than I do right now. My children are all in their 20s. They're all adults. They're out in the world, so it's easier for me now. The first time I ran for office, my children were age 6 to 11, and so they all were involved in the campaign. All my children know how to campaign, which I think is very, very interesting and fun. And I think they learned that there were other people in the world besides them, and that that they had to be engaged in the community, that it really made a difference. And I learned that from my mother in a great way, because she was a teacher and a school librarian. And so she really provided a lot of support to her students, really knew the community, because it was a small community where I grew up. And so I think it's important for kids to see their parents doing public service, to making a difference in the community and caring about other people. So I think that's a great benefit. Now, on the reality side, I have to say, when my kids were little, I was tired. You work a lot. I did try to go home every day to eat dinner with them, and then I'd leave it sitting on the table and go to my public meetings or my evening meetings. I tried to go to all their school events, and certainly I missed a few, but I did really prioritize going to their events. And I don't know how old your children are. How old are they?
I have a daughter that's 9, one that's 12, about to be 13, and then my son is actually 21, so he's that age where it's more of the self-sufficiency, kind of not as concerned about those kinds of things, but it's the same issues.
So
I mean, it really is.
Do people engage with your children ever to say, hey, tell your dad this,
trust
that,
me.
or the other thing?
Being the chair of education, it's very interesting, because my daughters are oftentimes talking with their teachers, and then they start talking about education, and they all know what their dad does. And so I remember when I first got elected to the council, Anaya, my oldest daughter, would come home and tell me, yeah, Dad, they were saying that you guys are working with the budget now, and they really want you to support the schools. So the message was very clear being sent home. But it's really one where I've experienced the same thing, where it's been that active engagement has really meant a lot, and they really understand what it is to be a citizen that contributes to the overall, productiveness of society.
Be active, Montgomery. Woo! Be active. Be active, Montgomery. Be active, Montgomery. Be active, Montgomery.
From grill marks in Clarksburg, the conversation between County Councilmember Craig Rice and Frederick County Executive Jan Gardner continues. To start things off, Councilmember Rice asked Executive Gardner what drew her to public service.
I grew up in a small town in a rural area, and my mother was a teacher. She knew pretty much everybody in town, which meant as a child I could never get in trouble because she would know. And she was very generous. She knew the kids in her school who needed something. And she always said, you don't have to look for people to help, they're all around you. So I learned generosity from my mother, and she made us as children give away our toys to other people who needed something. And she was always willing to go the extra mile to help somebody. So I did learn a lot of that from my mother, and also from my dad. They've both been engaged in the community. Fortunately, my parents are in their 80s, but still living and still engaged, still doing things. So I learned that from my parents. So I did get some interest in public service from them. Not that they were in a political office, but because they just had that daily priority to help other people. So what about you?
I just got chills because everything that you just said was exactly what I saw from my mother. My mother was a teacher, taught special education at Model Secondary School for the Deaf, and then became principal of Model Secondary School for the Deaf. And I remember all throughout my time growing up, my mother would actually take my clothes for some of those kids that needed them and would give them to those children. I mean, toys, the whole nine. I mean, that's what teachers do. It seems to be a part of the handbook. And I think something that you said is so important and so true. Teaching is public service. It really is. And I mean, so it's that giving back, it's that kind of mindset. And it's interesting, when I was talking with Mel Franklin, who we did No Boundaries with, his parents were the same way. And I think if we look back with a lot of elected officials, there's always somebody in our family who's given back. My dad served in the Marine Corps. All people who still believed that giving back matters so much, and helping to make your community a better place, however you do it, whether it's in the education realm or anywhere else.
I mean, one of the things my mother did is we didn't have a local public library, so she kept the school library open all summer. And so part of our job as her children was to shelf books and check out books through the summer. And so that was just, again, something we did because my mother thought children should have access to books through the summer, so she made sure it happened. Simple thing, but there's still a message in there.
Absolutely. Talking about libraries, I mean, I served as the Montgomery County Council's lead for libraries, and so we're delving into budgets right now affecting our libraries and seeing a tremendous change in terms of where our libraries are. Some things changing, but the real consistency is that how important libraries are to our community and how important they are to our kids, providing safe spaces. I know that you have experience as well in supporting libraries. Talk to me a little bit about what libraries mean to you.
Well, I served on the Frederick County Public Library Board of Trustees for at least 4 years, maybe a little bit longer. So we set out in Frederick County when I first became a commissioner to build more libraries, which we've done. and people appreciate them. We have a smaller population than Montgomery County, but we have over 100,000 people visit our libraries every month.
Wow.
2/3 of the people in our community have a library card. People do come in to use the technology. They come in to check out books and audio visuals, but we have a lot of events, a lot of community activities in our libraries, and so I really think they've become community places for people to gather, get information, and it's all about lifelong learning. And it is, obviously it's a cost to our budget, but it is free to the users. And so I do think it is an equalizer, and it's an important part of education. So when I presented my budget, you know, I started out with our K-12 schools, moved on to the community college, moved on to our higher education center, and included libraries, because I think libraries are part of it, and people love them and enjoy them. And, you know, they're not the old-fashioned libraries anymore. And so I'm sure the same thing is true in Montgomery County, that your libraries do more things than they did when we were kids.
That's right, and it's about, you know, adapting to the new changes that we're seeing in our communities, whether it's creating more community spaces that we know are necessary, but also expanding our world language collection that's there to reflect the growing diversity that we're seeing in our community. E-books, you know, keeping up with the 21st century and all the things that we see there. You know, it's kind of aligning our library system with much of what we see in business. You know, as businesses in the community adapt and change to the growing needs, we see our libraries doing the same thing. And speaking of business, I think that it's important to understand is kind of the foundation coming through that. You know, we all gain experience and have experiences in our lives. We talked about what our mothers meant to us, but also what about some of the other influences that affected you when it came to, you know, helping to shape the person that you are through your other life experiences? Well,
I think we're accumulation of all our life experiences, and we bring all those experiences to the table. So I think both of my parents were influential. I think my grandmother was influential. My grandmother was a driving factor for the whole family, really valued education, even though she was not educated herself. And I think, you know, in my adult life, I had work experience. I worked for a big company like you did for the Quaker Oats Company. And even in a big company, they had a great ethic of valuing their employees. They, you know, obviously we made food, and they empowered any employee anywhere to put a food product on hold if they thought something was wrong with it. The people working in the lines, the people working in the warehouse, wherever they were. So quality assurance was everyone's job. And so they had a good work ethic, and they would reward people with bonuses who did good work. And so I really enjoyed working there too. So that was a good experience to see those values in a large business. And so that was a perspective too. And of course, I also had the experience, since I've been married to my husband for over 30 years, of the experiences he had with his family, which is very different than mine. Grew up in a different part of the country, and so different kinds of community service there.
The same kinds of experiences that you had when it came to your corporate experience are pretty much very similar to mine, and it really speaks to what's important when it comes to values in a company and how that then reflects on its employees. You know, I worked for Marriott Corporation, and Mr. Marriott's vision always was take care of the employees will take care of the guests, and the guests will keep coming back. And, you know, believing in that instills in you that it's always about giving back and making sure that you're taking care of people. And, you know, it's hard to think oftentimes in this society of where we talk about Wall Street and we talk about big business and how folks don't care, that there are huge companies out there that really do. And they fly in the face of what we see when it comes to what's important. And what's important is taking care of employees, making sure that people have stable jobs, making sure that our economy is strong, but also making sure that they give back. Making sure that we're allowing people to be successful and supporting them. And so, you know, that was one of my great experiences, and it was the previous job that I had before joining the state legislature, and I really carried a lot of that and that vision for what it meant to the state legislature and then now on to the county council.
Are you sure they can recycle us, Clamshell?
Hey, Dome, we're on a new recycling postcard.
I can't wait to make a new start. Maybe I'll be a red carpet at a big premiere.
And I'll get to paint the White House.
Shh, here he comes.
Now you can recycle more plastics in Montgomery County, including #1 PET plastics such as clamshells, deli containers, trays, lids, domes, and cups.
We're in!
For more information on recycling, contact the Montgomery County, Maryland Division of Solid Waste Services at 311. The wait is over. Recycle more plastics today.
As No Boundaries continues, from grill marks in Clarksburg, Frederick County Executive Jan Gardner started things off by asking Montgomery County Councilmember Craig Rice about his decision to run for political office.
It's actually an interesting story because I was working for Marriott at the time, and I was actually on their government affairs business council.
Okay.
And so we had done some lobbying on Capitol Hill, going and talking about visas and making sure that some of our employees that live in other areas throughout the world would be able to come to the United States to be able to train, to get experience here locally in the States, and then take that training back to their respective countries to be able to continue to elevate the Marriott brand and the Marriott corporate culture. You know, plus I was in Montgomery County Young Democrats growing up. I grew up in an area that was very politically active, and so for me it was one of those where all those things kind of culminated together, and people started calling me at work Congressman Rice. They'd be like, he's always talking about political issues and focused on political stuff and bringing about things that were important in the community. And so I said, you know what? I think I'm going to run for office. So I went home and told my wife, and she was actually pregnant at the time, so that was a little bit of a challenge, and told my wife, I said, I think I'm going to quit my job and run for office and run for the State House. And she said, what?
Quit your job?
Sure exactly. that was where she harped on. It wasn't about the political office piece, it was about the quit your job piece. But we had a great conversation, and she's always been an incredibly supportive woman who really believes in me. And you know, I believed in this. I really wanted to do something for my community, and so it really was stepping up to the plate, saying that our community deserves a voice, that they need to be a part of the process all the way through. And so I'm really happy to see, you know, now fast forwarding almost 9 years later, being involved at both the state level and now at the local level, that I feel as though I've been able to contribute a lot to my community, and so it's just been really great.
I do think these jobs are the best jobs that are out there because
absolutely.
you can make a real difference, a lasting difference in your community.
That's
it's very
right.
fulfilling on that level.
You know, speaking of making differences in the community, one of the things I know that you and I both are focused on is about growing businesses and seeing a lot of the change that's happening in our communities. You know, I represent the Up County in Montgomery County, and so it's one of the more rural areas of Montgomery County still, but a lot is changing. We're here in Clarksburg, where this very restaurant wasn't here a few years ago, and we had to go through special approval to make these kinds of things happen. But really, Clarksburg represents one of the last areas of growth in the county where it's new growth. We're doing a lot of infill development, of course.
And going up.
And going up, that's right. It really is kind of trying to create a balance between understanding that we still have to preserve a lot of our agricultural areas, and that's important, but at the same time we still have to continue to grow spaces for people to live. How are you balancing that in Frederick?
Well, it's a fine line to balance all those legitimate competing needs in your community. So our growth should be in and around the city of Frederick, which is our core traditional community. But we do have 12 municipalities, and they're spread out all over the place, and some of them will grow and some of them won't. Some of them are very small and don't even have water and sewer. But Frederick City's in the middle of the county, where there's a lot of pressure from Montgomery County and also from coming out the I-70 corridor into the county. So that whole area along I-270 and 70 and the area in between it are under a lot of pressure for growth, and yet they're not really traditional growth areas, they're traditional farm areas.
Yeah.
So one of our challenges is to try to have that population growth come all the way into the city of Frederick or the surrounding suburbs of the city of Frederick, so we can concentrate that growth where we have services. And certainly we've had a lot of population growth over the last few decades. Over the last 40 years, our county has basically doubled in population.
Wow.
And so, so that has created, opportunities and challenges. So we've had a lot of growth in terms of retail to support that, a lot of shopping growth, and I think people have enjoyed that part of it. And we're looking to grow more jobs in Frederick County. We had a big investment in Fort Detrick, which is our bigger employer with about 10,000 employees. Between 2006 and 2010, the federal government spent about $2 billion there. Wow. And so a lot of our opportunity is spin-off from that federal research, which is really in life sciences and biotech, and that's where we have a good partnership opportunity with Montgomery County, that I-270 corridor.
That's right.
Most of those biotechs want to be close to NIH or the FDA or to NIST, which are all in your county, and it seems that we have some life science companies that are located both in Montgomery County and in Frederick County, MedImmune, AstraZeneca being the biggest, where the research component is in Montgomery County and the manufacturing component is in Frederick County. So we have to have a good partnership there.
That's right.
Between our two counties to make sure we capture the opportunities that exist in that industry. And I think that's one of the ways we want to frame ourselves in Frederick County or define ourselves. So we try to balance our development with our ag preservation. And when I was in one of my earlier terms as a commissioner, we did introduce an installment purchase program, which is completely county funded, and that's preserved over 15,000 acres.
Wow.
So, and we want to preserve Sugarloaf Mountain area,
That's
which
right.
is very close to Montgomery County on the line.
Absolutely.
So we share a lot of things. You have an interesting district in the standpoint that you have some rural as well as some growth areas. So that's very similar to what I have in Frederick County.
You look at Germantown 20 years ago versus the way it is now. We have a brand new hospital that's there. We have a Wegmans that's there. And I look at all the development that's growing around that area. And if you had asked people 20, 25 years ago if they saw that for Germantown, folks would tell you not at all. But it's amazing to see the growth that's happened there and how Germantown, if incorporated, would be the second largest city to Baltimore. So, nobody envisioned that before. It was slated in some of our master plans that would be a growth area. But I think that the important point that you tied on is the commonalities and the link. And what I think that we have to do in working together is to support the linked structure between the two, that infrastructure that's necessary. You've mentioned I-270 a number of times, and I know that you're as passionate about this as I am. And that we're working together to try and really get the state to support the widening of I-270 as well as bring mass transit, whether it's the Quarter City Transitway. I've always been one of those folks that said that the Quarter City Transitway should never just stop in Clarksburg. It should go all the way up to Frederick. We have to realize that, just like you said, that connectivity matters so much and really is important.
Well, I'd like to see quarter cities expand at least up to Urbana. I think that would be a good first step for that.
Absolutely.
Bus rapid transit, bus on shoulders, and I do think, particularly on the Frederick County side, we do need to widen I-270. But I think one of the things that's looming long-term for us is how do we keep our millennials, our youngest generation, living in our communities and working in our community. We're all trying to market to them. They're much more urban-centered.
Yep.
They don't really want the suburbia and the commute of their parents' generation.
That's right.
So I'm really trying to focus on the vibrancy of the city of Frederick, which is that downtown retail corridor, all the great events we have in the city of Frederick. And I'm trying to put our business incubator downtown because I think that'll help that younger entrepreneurial spirit grow, because they want to have that vibrancy of the city. So I really think we have to focus on keeping our young people here, as we know that we're also going to have that growing senior population.
Absolutely. Well, I know that the future remains bright for both Montgomery and Frederick. It really is a case of us really balancing the needs, understanding what's really important to both of us, and continuing to work together. And on that spirit, I want to thank you very much for coming out here to Clarksburg to grill Marks. It's been great.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed this conversation, and I really do want to have a stronger partnership and a stronger relationship with Montgomery County, and so I appreciate your outreach and your efforts to make that happen.
Thanks so much, Dan.